Oh, it seems we're spinning.
All right. Okay, good afternoon or morning or evening, depends on where you guys are at. Right now we're chatting with Freya of Locke's Dogs, Fun Not Fear Club. And
Hi.
if you haven't yet, you should be checking her out because she is pretty awesome. Freya and I have known each other for eons, it feels like eons. But we used to do ICANN together, and besides that, she will be one of our speakers for Trainers for Rescues. She's actually we already have a designated time, which is very exciting. She's going to be presenting on July 12th at this same time, and she's going to be talking about her Fun Not Fear Club. What are we going to do today? We're going to be talking about just her topic. You get to know the speaker, this fabulous lady behind you, a little bit more, and see how she can help you in your everyday life for your doggies or your kitties or your rescue, whatever you need. Okay, Freya, go for it. Introduce yourself.
Oh, hello. Right, I'm Freya Locke, obviously, and I am the owner of Locke's Dogs. I created the Fun Not Fear Club and school, and I am also the owner of the Dog Welfare Alliance. I'm a trainer and behaviourist and ex-NIN in the UK. And yeah, as Ruby says, we've known each other for a long, long time. We've done ICANN together. We've both been into dogs. Pet professional guild, all kinds of different things. So
and Dog Welfare Alliance too.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we go way back, don't we?
Oh yeah, it's like I etched on my skin like a tattoo.
And
Not
Ruby
yet.
and I, we're really good friends outside of the dog world as well, which is quite
Yeah.
nice. So
Yeah, she gets to hear all the stories about my cats. So I'm very sorry. They've already been mentioned quite a lot in these presentations, so I'm gonna be mindful about that. Okay, so Freya is based in the UK, and she also has two amazing children.
Mhm.
And
Well, they're quite big children now. They're 20 and 23.
they always be children in my eyes. And so one thing I really love about Freya is that she's sort of the Fun Not Fear Club because of how your kids. Can you talk us more about that?
Well, myself, well, to start with, I mean, the Fun Not Fear Club, what that's about, it's about anxious dogs and anxious people. And sometimes, anxious people can actually find it quite difficult to ask for help. And I tend to find that anxious dogs and anxious people seem to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, the people need help guiding through quite a lot of things. And if they are nervous, or if they don't understand what's going on, or if they, if you're throwing a lot of long words and jargon at people and they're already sort of quite worried, that can make it harder for them to be able to put into action things like training and behavior work and stuff. And I mean, I know myself that, I mean, I came into behavior quite later on. I mean, I was in my 30s before I started studying, and I was really I was sort of completely befuddled by all of the long words, the jargon, everything else. I just wanted to know how to help my dog at the time. And as somebody who has PTSD myself, I get quite worried about quite a lot of things quite easily. And my children, they both have anxiety and special needs themselves. And they through them and through my own dog Moo, who also had like a lot of anxious problems, his was due to ill health. I just kind of discovered like different ways of trying to make things a bit easier for everybody. I mean, I must admit, I'm not qualified in human anxiety and that kind of thing at all, only with dogs. But experience has taught me how to make it easier for people with anxiety. And one of those ways is literally just trying to cut out all the jargon, trying to cut out all the difficult things and starting with things that people can actually, that they can already do, and building on it, and teaching them that they don't necessarily have to make loads of complicated training plans and stuff like that to make a massive difference to their dogs. So so this Fun Not Fear Club is really it's for both ends of the lead to develop a bit of confidence around each other, to be able to do all the things like the basic training and that kind of thing, and also to have like a network of people around them as well that they can ask for things when they need it. And the other thing as well is a lot of people at the moment are really, really struggling. So one-to-one trainers and behaviorists are, out of reach for a lot of people. So the Fun Not Fear Club was set up on purpose to make an affordable way of people being able to access specialists, and myself, and I have Stephanie Zickman, who done a lot of videos for grooming and that kind of thing in there, and I'm trying to make it so that it's accessible to everybody as much as possible. So, and we also have a rescue section in there as well, because rescue dogs themselves, they have like a whole host of things that you need to consider on top of what you would normally be considering, like things like their history and stuff, and just say, like, different dogs from different areas of the world, sometimes they're more prone to anxiety problems and stuff. So it's useful to have like that. Well, there's a whole section of stuff in there that is literally specifically for rescues. So yeah. So I'm rabbiting on.
No, you're doing great. I also just don't like to interrupt people, because I think that what you're saying is very important. So because affordability is one thing that is very important to me. I have payment plans and for my courses because of the same thing, and that's why I want to make sure that Trainers for Rescue is affordable. I mean, we can't do it for free because you guys are putting so much work into this, and I really appreciate all the amazing work, but we're trying to make it as affordable as possible, because like you said, people can't afford they can't afford trainers, they can't afford behaviorists, and especially rescues. The everyday person is struggling so much, and rescues can barely get donations to just get the knowledge that they need. And so I think one thing that's really important is that you and all the other amazing speakers we're going to have the knowledge, and so we can give it to them. And I love that you are simplifying things like the jargon, because that's a huge issue, and that's one thing that I really want to focus for Trainers for Rescues, was to simplify the jargon, so in that way it can make sense to anybody across the world. Because if you use like desensitization and counter conditioning, well, that means nothing unless you know what it means. And so if we can just say small steps and incremental steps using gradual emotional states, but even then that's way too much jargon. So how can we make it really simple for people to go, okay, I got that, and here's what we're going to do. And that's one thing I want to make sure for challenges, is that people can take what you are talking about and they can apply it directly, versus going, okay, well, I just go that theory, but what do I do for practical?
Absolutely. And one of the ways that I find really helps is when we stop talking like dog trainers, we stop talking like behaviorists, because not everybody has a degree level qualification in dog behavior. They don't necessarily understand the 4 quadrants and all that kind of thing. They just want to know how to walk the dog. And one of the things that I find best to do, and I know we shouldn't anthropomorphize. Yeah, I could say it, anthropomorphize.
Oh, you did it. Yeah.
I know we shouldn't anthropomorphize our dogs, but sometimes a lot of what I do is trying to explain what the dog's going through in human terms to the human as well. So when I talk about desensitization and counter conditioning, I tend to talk about a spider, and I say, when the dog goes for a walk, it's like walking into a room full of spiders. There are triggers everywhere. It's really scary. They're all moving around. You don't really know what you're doing. But if you take one spider and you put it right at the end of the garden, and you can cope with that one spider, and then we can start working and making it better. And then, that's desensitization and counter conditioning. If every time you look at that spider, you get a 5, pretty soon you're going to like that spider. So that to me explains desensitization and counter conditioning a lot easier than trying to explain it the scientific way. And things like that, I find that people just go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we can do that, and giving them that little bit of confidence just makes them feel like they can do things, and then they're more likely to do things as well. Whereas what I tend to find, if you make it too hard for people, they shy away from doing it, or they procrastinate, or they don't put the work in, and then they decide it didn't work, or they can't tell you. And the thing is, with anxious people and anxious dogs, we just tend to get more anxious. So the more we can
definitely
so the more we can help by making things easier. And it doesn't mean that people are stupid, not in the slightest.
No.
It doesn't mean that we're making it we're making it like any lesser than somebody with all the knowledge of the big words, etc. But what it means is we're just we're holding their hand through it that little bit more.
Definitely. And I was thinking about the spider. I use an analogy of my sister. Like when I was a child, we lived in Vancouver. There's lots of spiders there, and she used to grab them in her hands and throw them at me. So so it took me a long time to get over my fear of spiders. She also would chase me on the beach with crabs in her hands, like massive. Like, oh yeah, well, yeah, sisters. So I always, but also, like, you know, when I'm talking to people as well too, I always use the analogy of don't repeat the cue because you taught your dog to not listen to you. Just like how if you tell your child over and over and over again, they're going to stop listening to you. Or I always say this, like selective hearing, like my parents, they can't hear me. Hopefully they're not watching this. But you know, it's like we have to use everyday analogies, and like you say, we're not dumbing it down, we're making it accessible. And it's definitely like these big words can be really off-putting. And so I was actually with my other work, I was just writing about how we don't anthropomorphize, as yes, I also said that word, but we also want to make sure that we have it so that everybody feels that they understand what's going on. And so Donia and I were talking earlier about empowering people, caregivers, whether dog walkers, rescues, or individuals, with the confidence so that they can help the dog wherever they're at. And so I think that's the same thing with Fun Not Fear, is that you are helping dogs, and but you're also helping the humans. And that's one thing that every single person in this workshop is doing, is they're helping the human as well as a dog. And that's critical because we have to first address the emotional well-being of the dog and the human.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't help one without helping the other. It doesn't, you know, it just won't work otherwise.
And I think that's really important, is that we recognize that if we don't help the human, like you said, like with anxious people, you know, anxious people kind of fidget a lot, like me. I'm trying not to. They fidget a lot and they do things over and over and over in their mind because they're just worried about the future. And so that's one thing, is, you know, how can we help these people who they want to help their dog, but they can't emotionally help the dog because they're going through every single scenario in their brain.
And I think the thing is as well is, you know, every time that something doesn't go perfectly, somebody who's not too anxious is able to brush it off and think, oh, we'll just try again. Whereas somebody who's very anxious will take it in on themselves. Or you know, they'll decide that they can't do this, they don't know what they're doing, they're you know, somehow they're at fault. And to be honest, I mean, like all training's never linear, you know. And I think one of the main things we do is we have to help people to understand that just because they've been training this thing for a week doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be happening overnight, you know. You know, and it doesn't make, it's no reflection on them, you know. And you know, just to keep going and to change things and to sort of mix things up a little bit, make it easier for them. You know, sometimes it's you know, the particular training that I thought of might not be suiting that particular dog, so we have to change the training itself, you know. But I think the more we make things easier for the guardians and the caregivers and the dog parents, the easier it becomes for the dog, because then they become less worried about doing the training. It becomes more enjoyable. The dog calms down and they're less worried about, you know, how anxious their human is, for starters. And you know, it all kind of goes in like a spiral, doesn't it? It can either go up or it can go down, and it's, you know, it's about getting them working together well, you know,
as a team. So that's one thing I always tell people when I'm training them, is like, if you're tired, if you're stressed, don't train your dog. Take a break. If you're frustrated, your dog is going to feel that frustration. And we're not saying in any way that if you have anxiety, your dog will have anxiety. We're saying that your dog can they can read the emotions off your face. So it's just more that, you know, we're just helping to have that clear connection between the dog and the guardian.
Exactly. You both need to be enjoying the training for it to work.
Exactly. And so that's one big thing is, like, if we're tired, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to be frustrated with the dog, and the dog's going to be frustrated, and then you're going to have a negative association for the training for both the human and the dog. And that's why I think like Fun Not Fear is really important, because you're focusing on, okay, if you can't do it today, that's okay. You can do it tomorrow or the next day, or when you feel you are emotionally capable of doing it.
And then the other thing behind Fun Not Fear also is, like, there is nothing that can't be trained, that can be trained with fear, that can't be trained with fun, apart from fear itself. So that is the one thing that we do not want to be accidentally training. If we're getting in a temper every time we're training because things aren't going right, we don't want to be training fear into our dogs. We want, even if we're not doing it on purpose, even if it's just a very, very minute amount, what we want is we want everything we do with our dogs to be enjoyable. So one of the things behind Fun Not Fear is we look for ways to make things enjoyable. So if they're not enjoyable, you know, it might even be something like, you know, like for humans, for example, going to the dentist is one that I always talk about. Nobody likes going to the dentist, right? But we can make that enjoyable.
How?
So in what I would do is I teach people to play dentist bingo.
Okay.
Right, so you think of 3 things that the dentist is going to say to you before you get there, and you all have a little discussion about it before you go in. So you've got your 3 things and your imaginary card. And when you go in, well, when we go to the dentist, we all sit there in the waiting room and we all go in together. And we sit there absolutely laughing our heads off. And the dentist just can't understand what's going on. And we're sitting there making little signs to each other.
Yeah.
You know, if he talks about, I don't know, have you been drinking fizzy drinks? Have you been, you know, have you been eating too many sweets? Have you been brushing? Do you use an electric toothbrush? Blah, blah, blah. You know, and we sit there and we just giggle all the way through it. And when we come out, we've had an absolutely brilliant half an hour because we're just sitting there giggling away because we're playing this secret little game.
Amazing.
So for us, you know, we've turned something that's really quite scary and quite, because none of us like dentists. We're all terrified of him, you know, but we actually turned it into something fun. And you know, that's like a human example, but I mean, there's so many different things we can do with the dogs as well, you know, like dogs that don't like going to the vets, for example, where you can turn the waiting room into a playground.
Yeah. I was also thinking about Twyla and your walks with her. You've been raking her walks, which I think has been fantastic because your dog Twyla is a very energetic soul. And yes. And so I love how you, every single walk, you kind of give her like a ranking. Okay, we did a like 3 out of 10 or we did 10 out of 10 because she likes to chase leaves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She loves to chase leaves. So one of the main things, one of the best things I've actually found for her leaf chasing is to not try and make a big thing out of it, but instead I put bungee straps on the end of her lead.
Oh, okay.
So that's where we come into the compromise part of the Fun Not Fear school, because like we talk quite a lot about compromising and you know, finding ways that work for both of you rather than actively trying to train absolutely everything. Sometimes a compromise is much easier. So we have bungees on the end of her leads. So most of the time she walks quite nicely now. And if a leaf does go scattering across in front of us, she just sort of boings after it and then boings back again.
and that's amazing versus being dragged towards it, because it's also a fun game for her.
It stops the stressor, and that just means that she gets out more because I'm not worried about it anymore.
Yeah, because I mean, you cannot control leaves.
Yeah. So, you know, and actually she looks quite comical sometimes going after him as well. So,
I walked a dog one time who chased butterflies. And I was like, you cannot do that. You cannot chase a butterfly. But it was, like I said, so comical. And the dog was having so much joy. The dog never ate the butterfly, but anything that flew in front of his face was like fair game. And I'm like, why would I take away? That's joy for that dog. Yeah. You know, why would I take away the dog being joyful?
Exactly. I can go out in a temper every night and be miserable because my dog's always jumping around after leaves and I never know what she's going to do. Or I can take her out on a bungee strap and we have fun.
Exactly. And this is why I love Fun Not Fear, is because you kind of understand that, okay, this is what my dog's going to do. How can I manage the situation so we can have a fun time where it can be joyous for the dog and for me?
I mean, some trainers would have them walking to heel, and you know they're not allowed to sort of go off and sniff or do whatever, and you know that's not me at all. I'd rather we sort of do a little bit of bouncing around and all the rest of it, but we'll both enjoy ourselves.
That's one thing I do with Boone, is the dog that I walk is, I mean, so he likes to he's very reactive towards he likes to eat children. We prefer to have him not want to eat children. Any dog, skateboards, possibly bikes. He decides on the day if he likes the bikes or not. Fair game. So I make him sausage trees. And so he's involved, or like, where's the treat? So if I know there's a dog up ahead and the person's like pottering around doing their thing, as people do, they potter around, I'm going to have him trying to find a treat that I've just tossed away. And he can go use his nose to find the treat. And he looks at me like, why do I have to keep finding these treats? Or like, you know, jumping on trees to like get the treats out of the trees. and it's a fun situation for him versus us having things. And so we had snow, because Canada, he would jump on the very top of the snow pile and look at me like, okay, give me my treats.
Yeah, it's always about trying to find something that works for both you and the dog, and it's not always about training the dog. Sometimes it's about adjusting your expectations of what you expect that dog to be able to do, and then, like I say, just turning it into something enjoyable.
And I know you're saying one of your challenges will be web walking. Can you go into what is that?
Oh, so one of the things I'll talk about is web walking.
Okay.
Now that is when like some dogs are very excitable when it comes to their walks, or some dogs are very or almost very anxious when it comes to their walks, and they're very highly aroused before they even go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then so they're as soon as you pull the lead out, they're either running away because they don't want you to put it on, or they're bouncing around all over the place, and you kind of lost the walk before you've even started.
Definitely.
So with web walking, what we do with that, it's about we break the walk down into steps. And if you imagine say a spider web.
Yep.
When a spider starts spinning its web, first of all, they do the middle bit, don't they? So they make it really, really tight, and they go round and round and round and round and round and round, and make it a real safe, secure little space, don't they, in the middle of the web. And then what they start doing is they start coming out, and then they go back in again. And then they come out for the next thread, and then they go back in again, and then they'll come out and make the next thread, and then they'll go back in again. And so what happens is that bit in the middle is where they're coming back to safety. It's where they're coming back to like a secure base, and they're going out, finding somewhere to put another thread, and then coming back in. And what they're doing is slowly building up a little network of threads to go out and catch flies and do whatever. So we need to be thinking in terms of our house being like the center of the web, and all the roads and the paths and everything that come out of the center of the web are like the threads of the web. And then literally we make first of all, we make sure that the center of the web is really sort of safe and secure. So we might do desensitization with the harness. We've got to make sure the house is a nice calm place to start with, so the dog's got a nice calm secure base to come back to. And then we might go out the front door and come back again.
That's great.
And then you go out and do a little bit of scatter feeding, and then you come back again. And then, the first sort of couple of times you go out the door, the dog will be going hell for leather. They're really excitable. But by the time you've done it 3 or 4 times, they're starting to slow down. And then after that, then they're practicing going out calmly. Yeah. So once they're doing that nice and calmly, and it doesn't always happen the same session. It might be that you do lots and lots of 5-minute sessions, over the course of a week, or it might be that you do maybe once or twice a day. You do it instead of going for an actual walk. But then you might start working your way up and down the front garden path. And after a while, they practice going up and down that nice and calmly, because they've been up and down it so many times. And then you go to the next bit, and what happens is each time you go to the next bit, it becomes exciting again, and then they're coming back into a place of calmness. What they're doing is each time that you're almost building up like a network of calm paths, calm roads, calm places for them to go and sniff. And instead of it being like one big long exciting drag around the village or wherever you live, it becomes a nice calm process of just chilling your dog out, doing a lot of slow walking, doing a lot of sniffing, doing it, and there's obviously, it takes a little while to get going with it. And the first few times you go out, you're not going to go very far. But one of the things I always think is, instead of going for a set route for a walk, think of it as we're going for an amount of time instead. So rather than thinking, right, we're going to go to the church, and then we're going to go to the park, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, you want to think, right, we're going out for 30 minutes or however long it is you decide you're going out for, and then you do your web walking for 30 minutes, and you build up that nice little calm little space, and then you just come back and chill the dog out again.
I think I was just thinking how useful that would be for people in a shelter environment, because when you get a dog out of a shelter, go for a walk, they're usually like this, because they're like, get me out of this shelter. I have to get out immediately. I have to, they're over aroused in the shelter, which for people who don't know, over aroused means like high adrenaline and that sort of stuff. So they're very high stress hormones. They're just stressed. So if you one thing that volunteers at a shelter could do is just easily do your web walking, and that would be a great way for the dog to really have this network of calmness in the shelter.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Because otherwise, every time they go out, they're practicing that high arousal, and
yeah,
you want them to be practicing getting a break from the high arousal, getting a break from the stress of all that's going on in the kennels. You want them to be like calming down and having some space from all of that, rather than it just adding to the stress bucket.
but what I was also thinking is that when you adopt a dog or you're fostering a dog, this would be incredibly useful, because a lot of big issues that I see with dogs is that when they're newly adopted or they're foster parents and they go for a walk, like I said, they want to go to every single place in the world.
Too much
that,
too soon.
exactly. So I think like web walking is one of the great things that throughout your presentation is going to show them, okay, here's what you can do with the first, even if it's 6 months. And if that's 6 months, like if you move a home, if you are, fostering a dog, if you're adopting a dog, whatever you're doing when the dog is newly in your home, you need to help that dog have this network of calmness in their area. So they, like I said, they don't practice pulling you or like, being over aroused, or even like a new puppy. And new puppies are phenomenal, but like as soon as you get the harness on, they're just like, okay, game on. We're just going to go for a big run on the leash, right? And so I think this would be very useful for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually works with triggers and things as well. I mean, I have one lady over in Spain at the moment. We do a lot of Zoom calls, and she has been web walking with one of her dogs. And over in Spain, where she lives, there's like a street of high fences with dogs just barking underneath each and every one of them. And her dog was always scared to walk past them all. But now that since doing the web walking, it's almost like they take the trigger of the dogs as part of the walk. So they go up past it and they know that everything's okay because they've walked past that a little bit before, and then they've come back, and then they've walked past that a little bit before, and then they come back, and they've gradually started working their way all the way down the road. The dog's absolutely going bananas either side of the fence, and their dog's in the middle doesn't care, because they've literally got accustomed just to walking up and down that bit and everything's being fine. So
well, I was thinking that those would be useful for other places in the world, like where they have more street dog populations. So maybe like you're walking past an area and there's a large street dog population, and your dog gets really nervous. And so, if you don't feel comfortable, obviously don't walk down that route.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about it's sorry interrupting you, but
no. Go ahead.
It's about showing your dog that that they don't necessarily need to be worried, even though that thing's there, because if it can't get to them, or if it's not likely to come and get them, and they've got this history of going past and nothing happened and they were okay, and you're doing it at a speed that the dog is capable of coping with. And I mean, obviously you're not just going to walk them straight down the road full of other dogs and things that are going off. But if you've done it like a meter at a time and then come back, and then you're going after a little while they stop worrying about the things that are either side. And if they don't worry, if they do worry about those things, then you just know you need to work on that trigger before you go down that thread.
Or even just don't go down that area. And so
exactly.
The
whole point of doing it is so that you deal with triggers as they come along. So if you know you're going to get to a certain point and then there's always a cat at that bench, then you can work on that cat before you need to progress any further. And then by the time you progress further, you're actually going past cat's fine.
I was going to say, my cats would be like, game on. So yeah, I always say that walking past Spark is like having to give a toll. You have to pet him every time you walk past him, or else you're gonna get yelled at. So what else would you have in your presentation that we could talk about? Just a snippet.
So I mean, we deal with obviously, I mean, the whole learning how to cope with triggers is a whole nother thing entirely. So if there is something that a dog's really quite worried about, I just want to make it quite clear that don't just keep walking them past it. That's not what web walking is about at all. It's about, you deal with triggers as they come up. So if you do have a dog that has triggers and they are worried about other dogs, other cats, other animals, people, etc., do work with a force-free behaviourist. Because, obviously that dog's going to need a little bit of help before they can start going up and down that particular thread of their web. Yeah. So I just wanted to make that absolutely clear.
Well, before I forget, this is where Trainers for Rescues is really important, is that we are wanting to connect like-minded rescues with force-free behaviorists like yourself, who can really help you in the long term have these tools and solutions, not just for a few challenges here and there, but for everyday triggers. And triggers, like you said, like let's say you're walking dogs from kennels and the dogs are all hyper aroused. Well, Freya has a solution, you know, like, and so Joanna has gentle parenting that you could do, or Beth has 5 cues you can practice. So like all of you guys have all these different tools that I think would be incredible for rescues to have in the long term. And so if they don't have a force-free behaviors as part of their team, they could definitely connect with you.
Okay, so one of the other things we talk about is something called spark behaviors, and spark behaviors, like I say, is about
Not my cat.
It's, it's about if you have, especially with dogs that are a little bit nervous, or people that are a little bit nervous, if you start with something they can already do, it's like it segues them into their learning. Whereas if you throw something entirely new at them, they find it sometimes quite difficult and overwhelming. So as I was saying to you before we came on, with the spark behavior, say for a human, you wouldn't put a 5-year-old in school and then expect them to be able to do their GCSEs. But what you might be able to do is give them a pencil, and if they can draw a dot to dot, then you might teach them to draw a dot to dot of the first letter of their name, and then they can start to recognize that. And then they might be able to do the rest of their name, and then they'll start writing it without the dot to dot, and then they might start being able to read their name on things, and then they start, maybe doing the rest of the alphabet and building up to like little words like cat, at, hat, mat, all those little words. And then they build up from being able to read and write and doing maths and science and everything else until they're at the point where they do their GCSEs. But if you hadn't started them off on something they could actually do and just threw them in at the deep end, you're going to destroy their confidence. You're not going to help. And it's exactly the same with the dogs. So we need to start thinking of things they could already do. And I'll go in the presentation, I talk about one particular dog called Jack. And Jack was really, really shut down. And we actually started rewarding Jack literally for flicking his ear. And just from twitching his ear, like, we actually managed to get him up and doing all sorts of things. But literally that was because we started with one thing that he was able to do, rather than sort of going, right, he must go out for a wee, and he must go and eat his dinner, and he must do this like every other dog does. You have to find spark behaviors that they can, and then shape what you want them to do from there, or what you think would be beneficial for them to learn from there. And then the other thing we talk about is something called compromise is cool. And compromise is cool is simply that sometimes you don't actually need to train something. Sometimes it's about just sort of giving in a little bit. So if your dog likes to dig, rather than trying to stop them digging, give them a digging pit. Everybody's happy.
And digging pits are so easy to make, and I think people forget about that, is that digging is an intrinsic or a natural dog behavior. This is what dogs, especially terriers, this is what they're bred to do. And also it helps them have a cool place to sleep as well. So like if they dig down to the soil, they can have a nice little sleepy spot in the shade, which is really important with our heat right now. So to make a digging pit, you just get like 4 blocks of something, put some soil in there, and hope for the best.
It's like Twy. I mean, one of the things we used to do for her when not so much now, but when she was younger, she used to have a real thing about shoes, and she absolutely used to love shoes. And you could buy her all the toys in the world. She wasn't remotely interested. She just wanted your shoes. So all we did is, we could have sat there and tried to train her away from not picking up the shoes or giving them back or doing whatever. But the easiest thing to do was just to pop to Oxfam and buy her some shoes. And she's got her own shoes. She didn't need ours. So,
and I think this is what we forget is so many people want their dogs to be a robot.
Yes, we don't do robots. We never do robots.
And we forget that their animals are sentient, and that they have these emotions, and they can feel pain, and they can feel joy, and they can feel fear and stress, anxiety. They can also feel relaxed and content, and all these different emotions.
Absolutely. And one of the things I find is that if you imagine it, like when we bring a dog into our world, right, we decide where they're going to walk, we decide who they're going to meet, we decide what they're going to eat, we decide where they're going to sleep, we decide when they can go to the toilet, we can decide what they're playing with, we can just, we decide absolutely everything. We take away all agency from their life. So what the compromise is cool is about giving some of that back again. Because if you imagine how frustrating it would be to have somebody, take away absolutely every choice you ever make, every decision you ever wanted to make for yourself. And even so with the compromise is cool, it actually helps dogs to gain in confidence, because they're getting to make their own decisions and things. And even if it's a choice between two toys that you've chosen for them to play with,
still 2 choices.
they will choose one or the other of those toys, and they will feel, you know, rather than you just thrusting something on them, you know, even if you're still giving them something that you wouldn't mind them playing with anyway, you know, for them, doing little things like that makes an absolute massive difference to their frustration levels. You know, letting them choose what treat they want, letting them choose where they're going to go for a walk, letting them decide, you know, ring a bell at the back door if they want to go out, that kind of thing. You know, giving them agency in their life is such an, you know, it's an amazing way to actually build confidence back in the dog again. And by compromising, rather than always having to train this and train that and train the other, you actually end up empowering the dog parent as well, because they then, that pressure's taken off of them.
Yeah, definitely. Because they feel that they have to be perfectionist. And but we're going to end there. Is there anything else before I let you go? Is there anything you want to mention?
No, just that I do have a speech impediment, so I pre-recorded my chat, as you know. But I'll be around after it for Q&As. Okay.
I also sometimes stumble with my speech as well too, and I've had that sometimes where you're doing a major presentation. I did one with Caroline from Barkett Place, where, what was it? When did I do that? It was last year sometime, and she's going to be one of our speakers as well. She's fantastic. Where I just could not say a word, and and she thankfully knew the word, and I was like, that word. And so it's I understand that completely. So if you ever have, again, accessibility for humans and accessibility for animals is incredibly important, and also inclusivity. Inclusivity. And so that's one big thing, is that why I want to have presenters from all around the world, because these issues are not just UK, USA, Canada based. These issues happen to people all over the world who maybe don't have the same accessibilities that we have. And so that's where having the challenges and short, easy things is something that they can take and they can use. And that's what's really important for this, is because you have the knowledge and we're just breaking it down into these little steps that people can do, and so they can have success.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to end there. If anybody wants to contact Freya to learn more, please check her out at Locke's Dogs. She's going to be presenting on July 12th. I will be sending the Zoom out to anybody who wants to be interested in, I can't talk, sorry. I'll be sending the Zoom out to anybody who buys a ticket as soon as they can. And then also, please, people remember, early bird tickets are until the end of the month, so contact us for the discount code. And thank you so much, Freya, for everything that you do, and for I made a mistake last week, and also for putting the wrong date. So I appreciate your understanding so much.
That's okay, absolutely fine. It's a pleasure to work with you. See you.
Okay, I will be sending you some photos of Spark soon, so you can have you can have Spark for your Sparks.
Yeah, you send me some Sparks and I'll send you some cat kisses.
Yay! All right, you take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.